Morning, Vikings fans. This is Morning Joe's in the afternoon, throwing curveballs. Look, we're on the same wavelength. I am your host, Joe Johnson, owner of VikingsTerritory.com and PurplePTSD.com. Here with Mr. Joe Overly, the editor of our network.
Wow.
How are you, man? I mean, wow, you picked the Vikings to win. You picked a very similar score to what they ended up winning by. You have to feel a ton of validation. As always, I find a way to feel validated anyway. Wow, what a game, eh?
I kind of am. My brother gives me grief all the time about picking scores. He just thinks it's a fruitless thing. And when you saw before the game that everybody on Fox picked against the Vikings, some of them picking the Saints two of them to pick the Saints by 17, another by 10, and he goes, it just shows you what fruitlessness this is predicting scores. And I said, well, I was only 5 points off, so I said, yeah, in your face, brother. No, it was exciting. I told you a couple of weeks ago when I went to the Packers game, I went as a fan and had a beer for the first time in 10 years at the Vikings games. No, 3 hours. And, I think it's infected this one because I was channeling my inner Joe Johnson with just my stomach churning and
that's awful.
Oh man! But I jumped out of my chair. I pumped my fist. I was just when they scored the touchdown, and also I freaked out when they started saying, they're going to review it. But I was so pumped. There was so much drama in this game, and then when I got home again, I rewatched it, and I was biting my nails all over. It was that intense. It was just a blast.
So what's funny is that my fiance had run at the worst possible time to go pick up pizza at halftime, and she ended up being there literally for the rest of the game. And then she just decided to go tanning because it was taking so long. Anyway, she was in the car for the last half of the second half, or the fourth quarter. And so, as some of you know, the radio is like 3 or 4 plays ahead of TV, especially when you're watching on Hulu like I was. And so, I told her right away. She was texting me what was going on ahead of time because too much information. I was on the toilet after that game seriously for 5 hours, and that's not an exaggeration. It was horrible. My stomach was ruined. I'm on the toilet right now. So
more TMI.
I told her don't joke with me. Like, I can't handle it. She's like, I would never do that. But I knew probably a play before, when it was second down, going into third down, I knew they had won. And so I went into the kitchen, because I watched all these games with my dad, and I did across like all of our social media a live video, and I said what I just said. Like, I know that we won, but my dad doesn't know, so let's get like a real reaction. Now, his reaction, not knowing, was a million times more subdued than mine, even though I knew. Just seeing it, I totally get what you mean by rewatching it, because seeing it live, that was completely genuine, my response. It wasn't for clicks or anything. I was so happy, so relieved. That's more relief than happiness, and happiness took a while, but I was just elated, and it was just one of those wins that we're going to remember, I think, forever.
Yeah. I scared the hell out of my dog. I was watching with my wife and our new dog, and I just was just yelling, screaming. And so she thought I was screaming at her, the dog. And I said, oh, no, Daisy, it's all right.
Yeah, my dog kept coming over and licking me like, are you all right?
Exactly.
Tons to talk about in this game, too. I think we should start with, of course, the topic du jour after the game, because what I like to do, I love watching football in a way. My favorite thing to do, though, is after they win, is just submerge myself in the feeling of it, watch the highlights. I was a little perturbed Monday morning that the number one topic everywhere was Tom Brady. He would be a Dolphin. It took 45 minutes to get to the Vikings game, it felt like, on satellite radio, on everything. But the number one topic, of course, was the offensive pass interference, whether or not people thought that's what it was, whether or not the league was consistent in their call. I will just start off by saying, okay, I want to try to be as objective as possible here. I do understand that most of the experts
interference.
Yeah, most of the experts said that it was. Because he extended his arm and thus impeded the defender's ability to make a play. The consistency lies in the league taking the precedence of the call on the field. They didn't overturn it because, now if they ruled it pass interference and it wasn't, it's very hard to overturn calls on the field. There has to be a ton of evidence. The league said that yes, in that spot. Yeah. So I kind of am trying to dissect it between why the ref called it the way that he did. It's a big spot. There was a lot of mutual back and forth before the arm was extended. I think that the ref saw more so than the arm extension, so he thought it was mutual. Kyle Rudolph has been very defensive of it. He's been on multiple shows, and he basically said, I think his quote was, "That's not how football works. If you want it to be flag football, it will be, but there's always contact on these sorts of plays." If it was, I'm not a fan of the argument that, well, it comes down to the last play and you should have won, then it doesn't matter anyway. And I'm separating all of that from the fact that, from a fan base perspective, I have no sympathy for the Saints fans for obvious reasons. They also, I think, lost some credibility with the refs in that game by chanting in the first half about hits that were completely legal, and they were getting upset. They had these great views on their Jumbotron to show that these were legal hits. I think maybe that kind of crept into the subconscious of these refs too, that the fans were overreacting. Either way, the league did it the right way. They reviewed it in New York. They don't review it on the field. Every play was reviewed. Some of the players for the Saints after the game were like, well, I thought they were supposed to review every play within 2 minutes, every scoring play. I'm sure we'll see another rule change for next year. If anything, the argument that I agree with that I've seen some places is that they should just do away with the pass interference review penalty or rule change in the first place. It's been a disaster.
I wonder if that's what's behind some of it and the way they applied it this year. If I can chime in.
Yeah, of course. I guess.
What's that?
I said I guess because I was ranting for like 5 minutes.
Well, you were going on to other things. I wanted to say something on this before you get off. It is, when I first saw it, I thought, like you pointed out, there's the hand fighting. I almost thought he could have been pulling his hand away because the defender Williams kind of grabbed Kyle Rudolph, and when you pull your body and you're trying to pull your hand away, you extend it. If he's got it right. That's what I thought originally. Yeah. And then I looked at it several times and I go, no, that's pass interference. I agree. It is. And there was also holding, and there was also hand fighting, and there was, and I agreed with their summation by Williams. And
okay.
Defensive holding. Someone else said the same thing. You could look at that. You could have called defensive holding before the hand fighting and before the push off. Yep. You could have made that call, which would not have been good if they had thrown that flag and both flags on it. Then it would have been, offsetting, and it would have had to go back third down exactly. But I was down in Mankato at Mankato Brewery last night and talking to some people, and it was kind of funny the way they said it. They said, well, yeah. They agreed. I said he pushed off. He goes, yeah, they did, and they didn't call it. So there it is. You don't need that's basically suck it. New Orleans, it happens. I go back to 2009 and see all the penalties there that were penalties, and they didn't call them. So, it's just the way it is. And I agree with Kyle Rudolph. I think I heard someone else say that the difference, there's a different way of looking at it between tight ends versus wide receivers, that they let them get a little more physical because they're generally bigger players. I don't know if that's true, but that may be the way the referees look at it. These guys are bigger, physical, and you have to do a little bit more to disrupt a pass receiver because they're bigger guys. So I I want to be the Vikings to get the win purely on, oh my God, we're Piers the driven snow and we would never cheat to win. But it was pass interference in a technical term. The rule, they applied the rule how they had applied it all year, and that's it. Game over. Goodbye.
Yeah, and it's one thing doesn't cancel out the other, but there were. I will never get my head around why Sean Payton didn't use that final timeout to negate the 10-second runoff. And you get down to 11 seconds, you have one play and then a field goal. If you were to have, the 21 seconds, you could run 3 or 4 plays and a field goal. The Vikings were giving them a ton of yardage. I wasn't a gigantic. I would have been, if they lost this game, I wasn't as masterful as I consider the play calling on defense to be in that game. Zimmer's best game coaching by far. It just felt very late 90s, early 2000s in the chunk yardage they were giving up. I mean, they only needed 20 to 25 yards to get in the field goal range, and it felt like they were giving them 10 yards of just cushion each time. It felt like both coaches were playing for the field goal, I guess. Peyton was thinking we have the momentum, we have Taysom Hill. Cousins hasn't shined in these moments in the past. We're at home, so on and so forth. But you think with the team, with as many stars as they had, you have Drew Brees at quarterback, that you would rather have the 10 seconds and those options than the other way around. But that penalty, they had a couple of those. I think at the end of the day it was six different penalties in New Orleans. But that was a very, very strange play call to me, or decision.
I would agree with you. I didn't quite understand it. I wasn't upset as many people were because but it seemed out of character for Peyton, who's a pretty aggressive play caller, to not.
I mean, didn't they fake a
punt? Yeah.
Yeah, earlier. I mean, he does stuff like that.
He does, and so I was surprised that he wouldn't have been, let's go try to win it right now rather than settle for the field goal. But it really seemed like he was playing for the field goal. And on the other side of the coin, I do not understand prevent defense in that situation. But then I don't understand prevent defense. I mean, I know you're trying to milk the clock and you're trying not to get scored on over the top. I get it. But in the same token, when you just said it, you only need 25 yards to get in field goal range. You're going to go to overtime. Then you are saying, well, okay, you're conceding overtime, and it just seems strange. There's part of me that I don't understand this rationale, and we see it all the time. Not from Zimmer or from him, but from our coaches throughout the league. I just don't understand it.
It seems to be the status quo, and I've never understood it. I never understood why when the Vikings, the last drive they had in regulation, I know why they're doing it, but it just seems like instead of running it a bunch of times, they did end up with second and long, then they ran it, and that didn't go anywhere. And then it looked like they were trying to do a throw, but Cousins was sacked. But I've never been a fan
baseball.
Of what?
So I mean, playing to the odds. You bat a left-hander against a right-handed pitcher, and they must have some numbers on this somewhere. That says, okay, in this situation, you got to play prevent.
But you feel like you never see the alternative to it, like an offense coming up throwing 3 times to pick up that first down. It's always run, punt, hope the defense holds, even though it wasn't holding that great in the second half, so you can already see what's happening. It was very, it was just, and I'm sure you can relate to this more so than even I can, obviously, just in your experience in watching this team, but it almost felt like the writing was on the wall. You could just see how the game was going to end. It obviously did not go that way, but I think we're very conditioned for it to go that way. And so to see those play calls, it's kind of like, really, just...
That's why you were on the toilet and I was looking for a bucket to puke in. Yeah, that's exactly right. We'd seen it before. And I had that thought definitely creeping in. I said, God, here we go now. I mean, you waited all this time. You played so well. You all played them. You had the lead, and they come working their way back, and we go into prevent, and we're going to go into overtime. We're going to get beat in overtime again by the Saints. Damn, that was there. You're right. It looked like a foregone conclusion. My God.
It was very apt timing. The Wilfs had come out last week and said that they had every intention on working with Zimmer next season and beyond, and for many years beyond that. The same.
Thoughts on that, Joe? Joe, what are your thoughts on that? I wanted to hear what you thought.
I'm glad you asked me it that way, because a lot of the stuff that I was saying and posing questions, last week we talked about having a new set of eyes on the offense. And a lot of that was predicated on the assumption that this team would go to New Orleans and get too cute and not play the game that they're good at. The one constant from Zimmer in these last 2 seasons, especially his gripes with DiFilippo, I would argue bringing in Kubiak, is that he really wants to play old school power football with the run, very similar to what San Francisco does. And it just seems like if that's what he really wants, why do they get away from it in these big games? And so I was ready to say, okay, if they're one and done and they go in there and they don't put up the type of game that the game plan was exactly. I knew on the first play, all right, we're going to have a game, because the first play was a play action rollout. It got blown up. It didn't work, but you kind of knew what they were going to do. That's not offense. On defense, Zimmer has also shown, in the NFC Championship game against the Eagles, that he just outthinks himself in these games, and he just doesn't let his players play. He has too many new wrinkles. This wasn't that. I think this was an example of Zimmer and the coaching staff perhaps learning from some of those mistakes this season and in the last couple seasons, and saying what I had said last week, which was, you want to go in, and even if you lose, you want to lose doing what you do best, because that means the other team was better at stopping you at what you do best than you were doing it. I felt like this was a prime example of them actually doing that, and it worked. And so I am extremely happy that that's the case, obviously. I think it shows that they do understand some of the things that were just extremely frustrating or head-scratching. And so, I'm a fan of it. Whether or not Stefanski stays or goes is another issue. But I think some of the stuff we saw, again, that's a lot of Kubiak in the heavy personnel stuff that they were running. I assume or hope they're going to do the same thing against the 49ers, going to kind of Rudolph for the touchdown that screams Kubiak. But across the board, Stefanski, Kubiak, Zimmer, Edwards, it was the best coach game that I've seen in a very long time. So, of course I'm happy with it.
Oh, good. I was called delusionally. What was it? Delusional nonsense that I had put up in defense of these guys and keeping this regime and getting some continuity. And then, about 2 hours after I posted it, the Wilfs came out with their support of them. And since that time, though, I got to tell you, I've had a different kind of thought on it, and just reading tea leaves, not exactly. The game plan on the field was, I've been tipping my hat to Zimmer. That was even out of the box for him. It
was something we had never seen.
Right. And I heard someone say that there was a couple plays during the season where they put Everson inside just for one reason or another. Maybe it was an injury thing or something. But so maybe it's something they had toyed with before. But, my hat's off.
Maybe when Linval was up?
Yeah, it could have been. And, but, when owners management or ownership comes out and gives you that vote of confidence, sometimes that's the kiss of death. Sometimes they're just saying that to keep the dogs at bay, so the media doesn't. Every time you say that about me, I start looking around. Oh my God!
I text you that at like 3 a.m. just randomly. I have every intent of keeping you in 2020.
Exactly. And it's not like he's staying. It's like we have every intent. And
it was very carefully worded. Yes. I will say that. I didn't want to latch onto the negative, but every intent could be extrapolated into lots of things.
Yes, exactly. This is my point. So then I start watching through that lens a little bit, and Zimmer on the sidelines just had a totally different demeanor about him than usual. He was so sure, so unnervous, a lot of times he's just hands on knees looking out and just, looking like a field general in total charge, knowing exactly what he was doing and exactly what he was getting. He wasn't, looking up at the score and looking around and up and down with the thing and the glasses and just, this is just all very subjective, but it's like, oh, there's something going on. Then you go to the press conference after, Joe.
He's smiling?
Well, he's smiling, but then until somebody asks him, and he gets asked twice about the Wilf vote of confidence. And he says, I don't want to talk about that here. He goes, I'd rather talk about it games. He goes, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And I go, oh, shit. And then he repeated it later when another guy who had come late asked the same thing. He goes, that right there doesn't say, this is frickin' nonsense, stop,
Yeah.
we're not, he just kind of, he left it open-ended too. And I said, God, now you got him, everybody who's, he's thinking about getting the hell out of here because his contract is up, or maybe he's just saying that. I don't know. It all. And
should we be relieved that McCarthy got the job in Dallas then?
Oh, God. Yes, I think so. I don't know. It's all conspiracy. It's all conjecture. It's not. I have nothing behind it, but it was really strange. I saw a different Zimmer on the sidelines, and he, like you just said, he coached one of the best games he has in purple, and so it just didn't seem like to me that the way I would have, skipped it up. And he in the past he's won a playoff game, and he's just giddy, and he's just fired up, and he's pumping his fist, And this should have been that one of those because nobody gave him a chance. He should have come in there and. Been firing off like that, and it was just a little different. So I'll throw that out there for it to keep that story going.
Maybe he's just a little frustrated by the fact that he has to say that.
I think there's some truth to that.
I don't know if the Wilfs felt compelled to say that because of the Dallas stuff or if it was because of some of the coverage locally. But yeah, it is interesting that was the case. And in terms of the game plan on defense, I had a theory during the game and afterwards that I wanted to run by you. One of the knocks against Breeze coming out in the draft and during his time in San Diego was that he was too short to throw over the top of the line. Stuff you hear about even Bridgewater or Russell Wilson, Cousins with his batted balls on a historic level. Last season, do you think maybe that switching around the defensive ends and the defensive tackles kind of screwed up his throwing lanes that he usually relies on because of his height?
Well, that's a good question. I hadn't heard that in particular attributed to it, but it's a decent thought. I know what I heard about it was that they knew that he was susceptible. They couldn't blitz on him. He could get the ball out so quick, so blitzing did nothing for them. But they could rush him from the inside and put pressure on him that way and disrupt him. And I had been saying to people past couple days ago, when have you ever seen Drew Brees so discombobulated?
Yeah.
He would fade back. He's looking left. He's looking right. He didn't know where to go with the ball. Now, it could be he didn't have a view of his passing lane. But, he's got, he's basically only throws to one player for the most part, Mike Thomas. So, they had clamped down on him. But he was looking immediately like Cousins does when Cousins is nervous Cousins, not edgy Cousins. It was really strange to see him. So I don't know what to do with the ball. He couldn't run up the middle because they were coming up that way, and he's not quick enough to get outside anymore. So I thought it was genius for whatever.
Yeah,
that's a good thought. Clogging his view is a very good thought.
So that was one of the things that we saw this season. At one point, I think around the Kansas City game, the Vikings had the number 1 and the number 2 defensive ends in regards to pressures in Danielle Hunter and Everson Griffin, but those weren't translating percentage-wise into the amount of sacks that you would have thought, and that's because a lot of quarterbacks were stepping up into the pocket because there wasn't a ton of interior pressure. Part of that was because Linval wasn't playing at 100% or at all. And so I thought, again, it was genius to kind of bring that pressure from the inside. And hats off to everybody in the secondary. I know they've struggled. I mean, outside of that one play, that double move on Rhodes, they played great, especially considering the injuries. And that's the one main concern I have going into San Francisco is how healthy is everybody. I mean, how is Rhodes? How's his shoulder? Is Hughes going to be available? Is Mackenzie Alexander going to be available?
No.
so on and so
no
forth.
to both of those, Joe.
Yeah.
Hughes is on IR, and it just came out that Mackenzie Alexander is having arthroscopic surgery on his knee.
Yikes! They might have. They signed some corner from the CFL this season. Maybe they'll have to suit him up. But it seemed to work. We've seen Rhodes bounce back from stuff that looks really bad on the field as well.
Right. And he played the whole game, so he'll you would think he'd be back. His wife out there with his minor ailments. This was, they call it a stinger or something, but he was hurt the whole game. And so it is a question mark. I haven't seen an injury report yet, but the fact that Alexander is gone for this game, could possibly return if they make it to the Super Bowl. But that's bad news. I was hoping to get him back. We did have Zendejo play in the slot, and he'll probably be assigned to George Kittle come
he
next Saturday.
He played well too.
He did. Really good.
Barr covered Thomas on a few plays that he did really well. It was really great on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, I mean, I thought it was very, very just ballsy to run right at what the Saints were good at. They hadn't given up. The stat they gave during the game was they hadn't given up a 100-yard rusher in a really long time. They didn't have that. Dalvin fell 4 yards short of that. He still, with 96 yards, he had 2 rushing touchdowns. I think he had 130 yards of total offense himself with screens and whatnot.
Do you subscribe to the theory that he was trying to protect his shoulder in the second half, because it seemed like he was running into a brick wall after getting 84 yards in the first half rushing? He got 10 in the second half and virtually nothing. That kind of makes sense to me, because you don't have just this injury that is debilitating for 3 or 4 weeks. You're rested for a couple, and then you're healed. I fully expect him to have surgery in the off season on that.
Big time. And I could see that, whether it was conscious or subconscious, I don't know. But he wasn't finishing runs like we were used to. Which I think a lot of that goes to the game planning and the changes they made at halftime in the Saints and wanting to shut them down. I mean, there was a palpable difference between the first and the second half across the board on defense as well. Taysom Hill, I just keep thinking, man, if the Vikings make a run all the way and then they got to face the Ravens. I almost want to say the silver lining there was that they could have done better. I think they were trying a lot of those, and I think you covered this a little bit in your post-game wrap, were tackling issues, more trying to take it down with your shoulders as opposed to your arms. Would have negated some of those longer runs that he had, because he was getting hit. They just weren't bringing him down. Now, he's a big dude. But I thought that was kind of the impetus for the momentum that the Saints had in the second half, was going to him more and more.
How the Packers let him go? That's
a very good question.
Yeah. They just must not see the potential in him, because
or they don't want
beast.
Yeah, maybe Rodgers. They don't want to have Rodgers feeling ticked off by having the quarterback spade him a few times again.
That's a good point. They weren't going to take Rodgers out to put him. That's interesting.
I'm speculating, obviously, but that would not surprise me one bit. Speaking of quarterbacks, though, with huge ego problems, Cousins. Wow, I'm kidding. You knew this topic was coming. A lot of people. What's funny? I wrote that article yesterday saying, this is the statement Cousins needed. During the season, kind of the goalposts kept moving for the Never Cousins people, from he's garbage to, okay, he's good against bad teams, okay, he beat some good teams but not in prime time, okay, he won in prime time but not on Monday Night Football, okay, well, he has to win a playoff game, then we'll talk. Now I'm already seeing in response to that article, he won a playoff game, well, talk to me next week. And I said, Jesus.
Well, you did put the word final in the title. I know you put quotes around it, but the final mountain for him to climb, come on. And I just figured out his final mountain to climb. It's not this one. It's not even winning the Super Bowl. It's when he's so good and so consistent and so great Cousins that Joe Johnson doesn't have to write a story.
Right about him anymore. He did say on the field in his postgame, those that know, because the people they asked him for those people. Pretty much. I mean, he looked at the camera, he winked, I felt it. That, do you have anything to say to those that said you couldn't do this? And he said no. He said basically those that know, no. Those that don't. And then in his press conference, he essentially said people are going to criticize, that's fine. The only reason I harp on it is because I just find it very odd that people of my generation have been waiting our entire lives for something like this, and now we have it. And there's just a large amount of people explaining it away. I think it's an internet phenomenon. I think even if you're dealing with strangers, people don't want to. They have too much pride to doing it wrong. Maybe that reflects on me as well. It definitely does. But I think that this was a really good game from him. I think he was lethal in overtime. I think that throw to Thielen was something that Case Keenum couldn't have done for a multitude of reasons, and it gives me confidence moving forward. I mean, I said for a long time, and I screamed this at my phone in my live reaction. If you use Cousins if you lean into his strengths, he can do things that people say that he can't. He can put up elite numbers, and maybe it's definitely because of the skill around him. And there is a really wide valley, like I said last week, between when he's good and when he's bad. I mean, when he's good, he's amazing. When he's bad, he's bad.
And I will say that
those are situational, though. That doesn't defend it, but you can mitigate it if you do it the right way.
Correct. Well, at least you're admitting that there is something to mitigate. He did have a pretty poor pass to an open Diggs there in the second half, a long pass, and he had plenty of time to throw that. And there was a couple times I was yelling at him, get rid of it, get rid of it, get rid of it, and he wasn't getting rid of it. But I just go back to what I'd said last week when we talked about MVPs, and I still think that Cousins is better when Dalvin is in, and Dalvin is the same whether Cousins is in there or not. So, he does need a little bit better team around him, but give it to him, which is what we all want. Give him the time he needs. Give him a situation like you described. Get him outside where he's comfortable, and he throws bullets into tight windows. He launches them deep in just beautiful passes. He does everything he can. He's got all the skills to do that once he's in a situation. He still gets jittery with the pressure up the middle, and that's going to be a little concerning coming this week when he plays another very tough defense. So
big time, and I'll just leave it at this. I think that he was smart enough to understand that leaving the little bit of money that the Jets offered him on the table. He's not, and I said this at the time, he's not Tom Brady, he's not Drew Brees, ironically. It's not somebody that, for the Jets, you want to really build a growing team around for a multitude of reasons. That doesn't say that he wouldn't benefit or be a net positive, but when the Vikings made the decision after the 2017 season, they saw a lot of missed opportunities down the field to Thielen and Diggs, and I think that he's a much more complete quarterback, but he's not going to, for the most part, be a Brady or a Breeze, but he's in this context, he was the perfect fit for what was available. I mean,
haters are going to hate, and like you said, and I feel the same way about Zimmer. They were all out. They're crawling out of the woodwork, and they were hoisting him big time on a get him out of town, and they're pretty quiet on him this week after that performance. So they'll cry. As soon as they lose, if they lose this week, the next time they lose, they'll be back. But you can't really say anything against either one of those two guys this week that they should be run out of town. It was Cousins had a he wasn't great, but he was very, very good. He was very good. That pass was unbelievable. Although I've been talking more about it from Thielen's perspective because I used to catch pitches in high school, and I'm not saying I can catch like that, but I know how difficult that catch was. He caught it with his peripheral vision. The ball came over his shoulder with his head cocked back.
Wasn't that the famous Jackie Robinson catch that everyone talks about all the time?
Willie
Mays. I mean, I know it's a different sport and a different situation, but to be running full speed, kind of half dive out, have it drop right in your arms. You don't have your body to catch it with. You have to catch it solely with your arms. I mean, it's good on Thielen for bouncing back. I mean, to have that the fumble. I mean, a lot of us are like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. Fumbleitis is coming in against the Saints in the Superdome. It scared me, and he obviously had rust to shake off, but he looked every bit the Thielen. They said before the game that he hadn't been doing regular treatments on his handy anymore, and so he had a great game. I do want to ask your opinion on...
Just before you do, one more thing on Cousins. That pass, the 34-yarder to Thielen was even better because he got drilled, and he knew he was going to get drilled as he threw it.
Yes.
Now Thielen made a great play, came back and dove it. Still, for him to get that much on that ball, knowing what was coming, and knowing what we know about Kirk in the pocket, phenomenal.
And I heard on 9 to Noon today, PA breaking down the touchdown throw to Rudolph, and he didn't really have a chance to set his feet. He didn't even really look that way. He looked to the right and then just kind of knew in his head schematically. I don't understand why you would leave Rudolph single covered against a corner like that either. I know they were sending an all-out blitz, but you think that once you saw Rudolph out there, you would say, okay, they're clearly going to go to him.
Right. Cousins recognized it, gave him the nod, and Rudy said that he says as soon as he saw it, they knew it was coming to me. So he had to figure out a way to get open, and he pushed off.
God, can you imagine, though, being, and we don't really talk, this is a football show, so we take a lot of things for granted, obviously. I was going to say something a second ago about Thielen's catch and regular people not realizing how hard these balls are thrown. But the pressure for him to say, okay, I see the coverage, I know the ball's coming to me, this is the biggest spot of my career, in completing that catch, one way or the other. Wow, it's just these guys, man, Rudolph in the end zone continues to show why he earns his money.
Yep. What a great signing. And you know that Zimmer wanted him, and everybody was ready to say, okay, he's done. We already drafted his replacement. Look at what he's done in the second half of this season. And, as a blocker in the first half, he has been a huge part of this team and its success.
Yeah, and I definitely want them to keep him. I think the dead money next year, they'll keep him anyway. There was some confusion about that earlier this season. Was that BC that had that drop up right off his hands on third down? Okay.
There was BC that had one, and people are saying, at least I saw in the chat that they said that Holland should have had that deep ball.
Oh,
He had his hands on it. No. He had one hand on it, then the second hand kind of pressed against his face mask, and the defender put his hand in there. That would have been that's your ball game. Yeah, that's your ball game if that's completed. But there's no way you can't blame Hollins for that.
It would have been like the catch against the Patriots in the 2007 Super Bowl. Up against his helmet, right?
Yep.
Same part of the field. Another game, we didn't have a chance to talk about this at all, so I want your take on what the Diggs sideline stuff. I know that they had a second conversation where he patted Cousins on the neck. It still looked a little testy, and I'm a Diggs guy. I love Diggs. He was my favorite player up until this season. But I find it really hard to defend throwing your helmet like that in a game that you're winning. And, I talked about this on my show about the Labor Live yesterday, the reasons why he would do that. The fact that, if you were losing, if you weren't in the playoffs, if you thought your numbers were affecting your income and you weren't going to get a contract that you wanted, this is a 10-6 team that was winning in the playoffs, therefore a good team that was winning in general and in that game. He has one of the biggest contracts of any wide receiver in the NFL. The crux of it to me was that he's just frustrated he's not getting the ball. And if you want to win or get the ball more, as Aikman said, that's not the way to go about it. No. Cousins has enough pressure on him anyway, and you would have thought he would have learned from either what happened earlier this season or his inability to hit Cousins when he was wide open against the Packers. That it's not that simple, and you can't do that to your quarterback. It's just not a good look, and it doesn't make him look like a good teammate. It makes him look extremely selfish, in my opinion.
I wrote a set part of it in my game rap about should be ending, about diva antics on the sideline. I even included a little bit of Rhodes when he and Harrison Smith got into it after that long pass. But I pulled it off. I deleted it before I posted because I've done it so many times. And I love Diggs just like you do. And, I've talked to him, and great guy, wonderful guy. But I'm so tired of it. And if it is, in fact, because he wants the ball more. And because he, granted, maybe for the right intentions, because he thinks he can help us win the game and blah, 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 blah. But if he doesn't have any more objective view of the game plan, what is needed, what it takes. There's 11 guys in the field. There's how many, 5 different guys, 6 you can throw the ball to. It might not be you all the time. If he doesn't have that, then, shame on you, Stefan. Grow up. This is a team game. And maybe this time you drew the coverage away from Adam Thielen.
Thank you.
Coming in hurt. And they're going to lay off him, and Cousins knows that, so he's going to maybe look there first because And I played a receiver in high school, and I've said this on the show before, and I hate even to bring it up because it doesn't even compare. But I know the feeling. You run a pattern, you're open. I used to come back in the huddle every time, suck it, wide open. And my friends railed on me forever. They would just say that to me because I would always, I thought, I'm wide open. How come the ball's not there? Not there. Well, I grew up since then. I was wrong. And so is Stefan. If that's it. If it's something else, I don't know what. But throwing the helmet, bad luck. And they're gonna, the cameras are gonna zero in. I mean, Joe Buck made this. He made this, for 2 or 3 series thing, and they kept going back to it. It's like, that's what you get. That's what it becomes, and it's just, I hate it.
I talked about it on the show, like I said, and I said that I think a lot of the greatest receivers of all time have a similar personality trait. There's a little bit of narcissism there. I think there has to be that driven to get to that level. But again, there's no other reason for it. If they were getting blown out, maybe I would understand it if they weren't in the playoffs or something. But you nailed what I was going to say, and that's just like maybe, I don't know, maybe Diggs is a little upset about the chemistry that Cousins and Thielen have together. I know that obviously to start the season last year they broke a bunch of records, but that was a testament to the teams trying to shut down Diggs and Thielen benefiting from it. And that's what happened on Sunday. I mean, Thielen was not necessarily an afterthought, but no, it was a very big variable and a question mark. You're not going to scheme to shut down a guy who has shown when he's returned the other times that he's clearly not up to snuff in regards to his health. And so he is impacting the offense, and he is doing his job, and he is earning his money. It just comes down to that. And the other thing that freaks me out about it is every time that he's raised the stink, he's done something that he didn't used to do with drops or balls bouncing off of his helmet and turning into turnovers because he gets caught in his own head, I think, a little bit too much. So I was worried about the impact of that. Yep. Yeah. And he had a very clutch catch after that across the middle for a first down. So I give him credit for that. But we don't need that. This is a happy time.
Speaking of Diggs and another thing on your agenda, which you mentioned the word too cute again, and I just want to say I don't ever need to see the double reverse pass from Diggs to anybody else ever again.
Was that a double? It almost felt like a triple.
Well, yeah. It wasn't double.
What are they doing?
Yeah, it's just I just don't need to see it. It didn't work the first time because he overthrew Cousins, and it didn't work the second time, and now they're running off it. And I just say, okay, Stefanski calling a nice game. I just, get us a different gadget play in there because everybody knows about this one. So I don't know.
Yeah, big time.
I don't need to see it.
And they don't need it. No. Well, it seems like those plays always end up backfiring and ruining good drives. This team is very heavily predicated on second and third and short. And when you do stuff like that, where you can end up being, like we saw in the final drive in regulation, if you're, second and 15, that just screws everything up. It's hard to run then. Yep. You become one-dimensional, so on and so forth. So how are you feeling about the 49ers? I would argue that this game on paper seems more difficult than any matchup that the Vikings may have in the NFC Championship, whether it's the Seahawks or the Packers. The Seahawks, Russell Wilson is playing out of his mind, but it's just a lot of Russell Wilson, and he doesn't have a whole lot of help outside of their run game, but they're very committed to that. The 49ers feel a lot like the Vikings. I think they're second and fourth in regards to the amount of run attempts they do per game, with the 49ers besting the Vikings, actually. That number may be different because of Dalvin Cook being injured. But it's two old school football teams. I don't think it's a coincidence that that's kind of the way that the Seahawks run their offense either, which is a little ironic considering how pass-happy the league is, but the three of the final four teams are old-school power-running teams.
You can put the Ravens in there, too.
Yeah. I mean, they lead the league in rushing for obvious reasons. They do a lot of RPO stuff. And the 49ers are getting some of their defensive players back this week from injury. It's going to be a very tough game. I think that, the one thing that the Vikings have going for them is the unfamiliarity that they have with these two teams. Maybe the 49ers being a year ahead of schedule in regards to their new window of opportunity opening, and the X factor is Garoppolo and his inexperience in general. But in games like this, you'd have to think that if Zimmer could stymie Breeze, that he's got something really special dialed up for Garoppolo and company.
It's funny. I don't want to look ahead, past this game because I agree with you. It is going to be one of the tougher ones. But I to be perfectly honest, I wanted the Vikings to play the Packers in the wild card game. I don't want any part of them playing in the NFC Championship in Lambeau.
Oh my God! Can you imagine that?
Yes, you and I would have to be checked into a freaking hospital.
Yes.
So,
can you rent straitjackets?
This is going to be a tough game, and as I started looking at the numbers, I have been kind of lukewarm on San Francisco all year, thinking, how come they're so darn good, and I didn't think Garoppolo was as good as his reputation had preceded him, and then I watched him in a couple late games, and I said, okay. He's a little bit better than I thought. He looked a little more jittery earlier in the season, and like you could rattle him if you got to him. So I'm thinking that's the Vikings, key to maybe winning this game is really take him out of it somehow and get him off his mark and off his game. And George Kittle is a beast. They're going to have a good game plan for him. I'm not sure. You'd said earlier, can they do the same thing with defensive ends in interior line against Garoppolo? I don't think so. I think they're two different cornerbacks, and this one's more mobile than Breeze is. So I'm not sure that would work. It's going to be a battle, and the other key in the Vikings' favor is the Vikings do suddenly feel like a playoff hardened team.
Yeah.
They have been in it in the a lot of these players were in the playoffs 2 years ago, and they went to the NFC Championship, and they got giddy about their victory to get there, and then they weren't ready to play the following week. I listened to Zimmer today, and he says, it sounded like they were quiet on the plane, and they had players saying, okay, enjoy this on the plane home from New Orleans, enjoy this, but let's get back to work. And there's veterans on the team telling the players to do that. So I'm hoping that since this is the first playoff game for this group of players in San Francisco, that if you get them off their game early, you can get them maybe panicking a little bit. You can maybe get them saying, okay, this is bigger than we thought coming in. And I know that's really kind of esoteric, and it's not grinding numbers and stuff because the numbers are not great. But that's I think that there is some experience difference there between the Vikings having a little bit more than this group, and I'm hoping that's the case.
I think you nailed it. That was in the paper today. Strip.
Oh, really?
Zimmer.
I should write for him.
I'm saying that I've been emailing them, but also at 3 a.m. It may have been yesterday's paper. I don't know, because I wanted to save it for my background and I was reading it. But essentially said that in retrospect, after the Minneapolis Miracle game, there was this huge emotional letdown, and they let the players celebrate just that night, but the next day. And essentially, they were not even from Zimmer, but like you said, leaders on this defense who have been there after Cousins came in and did his "you like that" thing. It was kind of like, all right, everyone settle down. We only have 6 days. We're the only team with a short week. This thing's not over. There's another mountain to climb, to paraphrase Mr. Cousins. And I think that's important because obviously we saw how that worked for the Eagles game. But to be fair, that Eagles game, and I actually rewatched it this last week, and
you need help, Joe.
I know, God, I was gonna say I need a girlfriend, but I don't have that excuse anymore.
Yes, no,
that game, my memory did not serve me correctly in that game. You know, the Vikings, as I'm sure we all remember, scored on the first possession.
Yeah.
My memory was that they fumbled on the next possession, which I believe they did, but that then things just got out of hand from there.
They fumbled on 2 of the next 3, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, it was like a 3-point game in the middle of the second quarter. It wasn't until the end of the second quarter and then the second half that things really fell apart. So the emotional, it didn't feel as much as what you think an emotional letdown would be, which is you just come out completely flat. They looked good. I think that's a positive in that, you know, if they can come out and get some points in the first couple of drives, making San Francisco play from behind, maybe by a couple scores, would be tremendous to make them get away from that run game and have to throw the ball more, lean on Garoppolo more. That would be great. I mean, his mobility is obviously going to be an issue. We saw that with Taysom Hill. We've seen that with Zimmer's defenses at their peak. You could argue this was the best defended game they've had, and they've struggled against Taysom Hill. They've struggled against quarterbacks forever. Not even just ones that pick up yardage, but more so extend plays. And so it's going to be very important that they tackle better even than they did, and that they finish plays strong. I mean, we haven't even talked about that strip fumble that Hunter had against Breeze. That was just extremely, extremely big.
It's huge.
Come down to just play sometimes, and so I don't know. I'm confident though. It's a week league. I've heard somewhere.
Yeah. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. They have a short week so that they get ready and start focusing and know that they have to take a week's long work and cram it into one day less and they start dialing in because, you know, in addition to, maybe it wasn't flatness as you were saying in Philadelphia, but maybe they just had time and space where they weren't doing their due diligence on their film study or whatever, because there were some. They looked either out coached, and I remember Harrison Smith running around like he didn't know what planet he was on.
I think that they had. I love that you said that, because I think that some of the we saw it even this season coming off of the 10-game swing that they had after the Thursday night game and coming off of the bye. When Zimmer and these coaches have too much time, I feel like. Let's say this week is a condensed version, but by Thursday they might have the perfect plan because they have Friday and Saturday morning. They think, well, let's add this wrinkle and that wrinkle. And I think that was a big part of the NFC Championship game. I think it was a big part of how the defense started last season. They were really flat for the first 4 or 5 games. And Zimmer basically said, I had to simplify things and just let these guys play. And so the shortened week might just be silver lining there because they essentially have to put together something relatively quick.
Keep it simple, stupid. You know.
Pretty much, you know. There may be a temptation there to do something outside of the box on offense, but this is going to be at its best anyway a slugfest between 2 old school football teams. In the trenches, it's going to come down to that. The Vikings' offensive line are arguably coming off their best game, especially that right side. Man, Josh Klein has been really underrated, not getting a ton of credit this season, but he was opening up holes like crazy. I mean, he and Brian Deal were just astounding on the right side. And so they're going to have an even better game against the 49ers, and we'll see if they can do it, but they're healthy. And you with Dennison coaching them, I'm relatively confident. Assuming, again, they don't get too cute. That's my only fear.
I'm happy
or
that
main one.
The offensive line had a great game against a very good defensive front. So that's good news because they got another one this week, and you know, in addition to the 2 you mentioned, Bradbury had a good game last Sunday and had the big pancake block that everybody was talking about. But that excites me about going forward. If that whole side of that line is getting better, now we just got to shore up the left side. And
don't move O'Neal.
No, I don't want to do that. I like what he's doing. You know, let him just get even better. And that's what they were asking him about today at Zimmer. He says, yeah, if he continues to get even improve, he's going to be really something in this league. So, that's exciting for the future. Right now, they have to do it again. They seem to come out of it pretty healthy. That there are some people I'm concerned about on the Vikings side of me because Trey Wayne's limped off, and we already talked about the two guys that are not going to be on the field in the secondary. And you always got Xavier Rhodes who was hobbled, and there was a couple others that Conklin went off injured, and we haven't really seen yet. So I'm a little concerned how we're going to come out of it, and because we need to be healthy. Those guys are sitting there waiting for us. They're healthy. So.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, just based off everything we talked about, I'm actually a little more. I'm more confident about this game than I was about the Saints game. The Superdome's really hard to play in. The familiarity aspect, the experience aspect. But yeah,
against them then?
No, I'm not. I maybe I should. Because everything I say tends to backfire on me tremendously. But I mean, I think it'll be close. I think it'll be low scoring. I think the Vikings are going to take it though, 21-19.
Wow. Yeah. Well, last week
I bled points.
Yeah, so you were a little high last week, and so I picked up a few points on you.
I must have been high picking that score.
Yeah, and so I've got a 37-point lead now. So I'm hoping I can.
Is that really it?
Yeah, I got 29 on you because I was only off by 5. No. You were off by 34. So you had picked a 42-38 game, and in New Orleans. You picked against the past 2 weeks, Joe.
I have. And I'm batting 50%, just like Cousins in the playoffs. I think this is the type of game Zimmer wants. Old school football. It's not going to be necessarily super dynamic. Although, as we saw when the 49ers played the Saints, that was like an instant classic sort of game. They put up a ton of points there. But, they didn't end the season particularly well either. They had an upset loss in there in the last couple weeks, too. So they're not infallible by any means. I do honestly feel like they're a year ahead of schedule. So I don't know what your prediction is.
I'm doing something unique, and I'm going to pick the exact same score again this week, and it's not high scoring, and it's even though I think that there are two different teams and things are going to change up, but I'm going to go 24-23 Vikings again. So we'll see.
Yeah, I hope we're both wrong because I cannot handle a game that comes down to the final drive again. I can't.
No, I hope we're both right that the Vikings are going to win.
I'm right about that, but I think it's like staring at the sun. It's just too much. God,
it should be fun. It should be fun. It's like another week of football. There's always that downer when your team is out and you're watching the playoffs, and that first week that they're gone, you're just kind of and so then you start watching the other teams and you get back into football. We don't have to go through that yet. The Vikings are playing again this week, and for all those Zimmer haters out there, this man has got his team a game away from the NFC Championship 2 out of the last 3 years. So quit talking about getting rid of them.
Yeah,
so that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, and man, who do you real quickly? Who do you got in Seattle? Green Bay. I think Seattle's going to beat them.
I'm hoping for it. I don't know. I think.
Is that because you don't want the possibility of playing the Packers?
Correct. Even though that would be otherworldly. Imagine what that would be like for this town and your sites and everything else.
Our sites. Wouldn't that be man?
It would be crazy. So, but I don't want that. I want those guys done. I want a week of the Vikings, playing with at least 1 week of the Vikings playing without the Packers playing, and but that's selfish. I don't know what I would do with if they were both in Lambeau, but I can't think about it. They got to get past this.
Has that ever happened?
They've played in the playoffs a couple times.
Yeah, I remember 2004.
Yeah, but it was they played in the Randy Moss's team beat them in the playoffs.
Yeah, and then he got traded. The W they put on Lambeau Field. I do think they'd be easier to beat than the Seahawks.
I think so. I don't know. The Vikings played Seahawks well up there in Seattle.
They did.
Yeah.
But
I don't trust beast mode. I'm not worried about him yet. What I'm concerned about is their big, tall receivers. Their deep Metcalf is going to be tough, and
Russell Wilson's playing amazingly. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is playing on that level. I heard on satellite radio yesterday how strange the narrative has changed from Seattle going into Green Bay. And somebody said essentially like a couple seasons ago, we talked about Aaron Rodgers being not only the best quarterback in the NFL, but perhaps the most talented and the best quarterback in the history of the NFL. And now he's getting outplayed by a lot by Russell Wilson, and they thought that was kind of a changing of the guard thing. I even in the Monday Night Football game, Rodgers looked shaky. He was missing a lot of throws. And that's encouraging. I think it's also extremely hard to beat a rival 3 times in one season. And in both of those games, you felt like the Vikings just lost them. They didn't necessarily, or the Packers didn't win them in that sense. I think they again learning from their mistakes. They know not to do what they did on Monday Night Football again. So that could be, but I would not survive it. I would have to watch it from the front yard or something. I don't know how I would do that at all.
All these teams that are left, the Vikings can play with all of them. So there should not be any of these go in there and fall on your face and let it snowball downhill like it did in the NFC Championship game 2. It's not that kind of thing. The Vikings are every bit as good as San Francisco, Seattle, and the Packers. So bring it on. Let's that's
the best way to leave it. If people want to join the conversation, I've been doing kind of we've done a few different iterations of About the Labor. I figured doing it the way that I've been doing it the last 6 weeks or so is something different that I think is needed in the Vikings online media landscape, which is just like a daily news of the day, some opinions, some rants. Obviously, it's me, but a lot of the shows are just based on audience participation and the questions and comments that people have. We have a really cool group of about 10 guys that are at almost every single show, every single day. We hang out, and I'm very tempted to change ATL from About the Labor to something like another therapeutic lesson, because it's like Vikings therapy for us. We always end up feeling better as a group. So tune in to that. You can find it on Vikings Territory, on Facebook, on Periscope, Twitter, or on our YouTube channel, which you can find on the homepage of purpleptsd.com and vikingsterritory.com. I was going to have Nick Swartzen on, but he lost his voice during the game, which he's done multiple times. And he needs his voice to make money, apparently. I told him he should get into prop comedy, and so he's thinking about it. TMZ if you want that nugget. But this has been Morning Joe's, the afternoon edition for the 7th of January. We'll see you guys next week, hopefully with some amazing news. I just got really nervous thinking that next time we do this, we'll know what happens this weekend. But tune into Vikings Territory and Purple PTSD for all your news on the Vikings. In the meantime, Skolaroni.